Welcome to Salt of the Earth Farm Stories, where the heart of farming comes alive.
You know, farmers love the land. I get tingles every time when I make that distinction because there's a spreadsheet and then there's a farmer. And a farmer just wants to regenerate their land. There's no farmer out there that doesn't.
G'day, I'm Darren Grigg, and today we're talking worms and a whole lot of microbes. Our guest is Nakala Maddock from Nutrisoil, and in this episode we break down exactly what is Nutrisoil and how vermiculture or worm farming is being used to build healthier soils. Nakala explains how the worm's gut is basically a microbial factory, turning organic material into a powerful liquid biology that can help feed plants and improve soil health, animal health, and human health.
And the more diversity of microbes, the more resilience you've got in your soil because they all do different functions.
We talk about what they feed the worms, why diversity is so important, and how a wide mix of microbes, fungi, bacteria, and archaea helps create more resilient soils and stronger plants. Now, I've just got to say, I love this product. And Nakala even makes the case that in some ways, humans aren't that different to plants when it comes to needing the right biology. And right at the end, there might even be a little scoop about a possible skincare product made from, you guessed it, worms. Just maybe. Here's Nakala Maddock from Nutrisoil. Let's go. Hello, Nakala.
Hi Darren, how are you?
Really good. Thanks for having me. Whereabouts are we today, Nakala?
Yes, so we're in northeast Victoria on the border of New South Wales and Victoria, Albury-Wodonga. We're at the Nutrisoil Production and Education Facility.
This is the HQ.
It is Nutrisoil HQ.
Now, I know you've got customers right around Australia, and a lot of our listeners will have heard me rave about your product. And just to be clear, I am a big fan, so we'll get that out early. But a lot of our listeners will have heard of you, but can you give us a basic explanation of what is Nutrisoil?
Yeah, so we're a family farm and we produce a worm liquid and castings, the solid, out of big worm windrows. So we're a worm farm, basically, yeah.
And this is, as you say, a liquid product as well as worm castings, but mainly perhaps a liquid product that can be used, and we'll get into the detail how it's to be used, but for fertiliser?
Yeah, mainly broadacre agriculture. And liquid is our main product, but the worm castings are gaining a lot more traction.
So would you say this is a vermiculture farm?
Yes.
Okay, so what is vermiculture?
I know. I remember when I married into the family, I was like, vermi what? Like, what is vermiculture? Graham used to just rattle it off his tongue. He'd say, we're a vermiculture recycling system. And I'd be like, okay, what does that mean? So vermiculture basically is anything to do with worms. And when he called it a vermiculture recycling system, it's about worms breaking down things that are used so we can reuse them again.
And I find this fascinating because a worm's gut must be like a little factory for microlife.
Yeah, totally. So you would think a worm's gut to be like a compost tea machine. You know, if we make a compost tea, humans make a compost tea or an extract, maybe more concentrated and complex than an extract, or a bioreactor. Another way to think about it, because manure is good, you know, we put manure out in the garden, we put it out in agriculture. It's great to have animals in grazing systems because of their manure and their urine. But the gut of a worm, it's different to a mammal like a cow or a sheep because their gut, it's more acidic, where a worm's gut is more neutral, and it is just great conditions for microbes to increase, for them to multiply. And there is something very intelligent about the worm's gut that when they move through the soil, they know what the soil needs. So they can increase a microbe in their gut by 1,000-fold if they really need that microbe to break down chemicals. Or they can cull microbes that are going to cause diseases. So if you think of a worm moving through the soil, it's there to create a healthy soil so that plants grow, so that then they have a food source and they can breathe, and they want less pathogens around. They want everything balanced and happy because they're producing eggs and their offspring are coming through. So it's the one animal that produces like the gold premium poo.
Yeah. And I used to always think it was worm wee.
Worms don't
excrete it, do
wee.
they?
Yeah, so they poo like us, but they don't wee like us. It's like they sweat nearly, like they've got little pores all over their body, and all of this gooey secretion comes out of it. And there's reasons for that. So again, you think of a worm lining the soil to make the soil healthy. It's lining it with really good microbes, so a balance of microbes that keep everything in check. It's lining it with nutrients which are available and complex and plants can use. It's lining it with antibacterials, antifungals, so that they can breed and that their little worm babies can live. And surfactant, like they need it to be slippery and slidey. So all of those things are really just to create healthy soil. But in our vermiculture recycling system, we miss the system and we collect all that excretion, not just washing through the castings. We need lots of worms in our system because the mucus around them is just gold.
And you must need lots, because I see hundreds of thousands of litres come out of these windrows.
Yeah, we do. We sell hundreds of thousands of litres all over Australia. So our worms are our workers and they are our priority. So we monitor our worms weekly. We know on average how many there are, how many eggs there are, what's the pH of their worm bed, what's the moisture of their worm bed, what's the electrical conductivity, is it getting too salty for them? And we just monitor them in this big spreadsheet. So I could say, okay, in March, how many worms am I expecting? In February, how many worms am I expecting? When am I expecting them to breed? Why are they not breeding? What's gone wrong? And that's how we track them and learn to understand what they like and what they dislike. Lots of things we don't know yet, but we've certainly worked out a lot of things that are just expected. So, for instance, they have an expected cycle. They love rain. If it doesn't rain, we can feed them all the well water we want. We don't use town water. And they just don't multiply the same way. So in droughts, we've found it a bit hard to collect liquids. So that's why we've had this big expansion. We've had to get more tanks so we can recycle the worm liquid back over to make it more concentrated, to get it to the level that we need to be able to sell it.
Right. So what's in the rainwater? Is it more nitrogen?
Yeah, there's microbes in the rainwater, there's nitrogen in the rainwater, there's energy in the rainwater. Like, it just brings them alive.
Wow, fascinating.
Yeah.
So Nakala, how did Nutrisoil start?
Yeah, so Lynn and Graham, who own the business, they were on a dairy farm and then a beef farm, and they had 3 kids, and they were health conscious. Like, they always had homegrown food, and they were into, vitamins and minerals and omegas and all sorts of things. Water, you wouldn't find Coke in their house. It was very much driven by Lynn, and we find this in agriculture. It's the wife who drives this health and focus on health, because they've got kids and they want their kids to be healthy. Yeah, they were on the family farm, and Graham had an accident. He was spraying out an insecticide, and it was dimethylate, so that's for sucking insects. And what dimethylate does is it disrupts their nervous system, and the insects get paralysed, and then they die. So it's a bit gruesome, and he was covered with it. So from there, he had lots of health problems. And I wasn't there back then. I can only sort of say from what I've heard, but lots of bouts in hospital and bed and depression. He was just never the same again. Then they had to find another way to farm, and they started with worms and using the worm castings. I think they started trialling it on chestnuts first, and then they started putting it out on their pastures, and they were getting similar results to what they were getting when they were using superphosphate and lime. And they were, over the years, having to put on more superphosphate and lime. Like, the agronomist was just bumping up the numbers all the time. So farming is hard to make money when you're having to put more inputs in, and those inputs were causing soil health problems and animal health problems as well. Then they worked out the liquid was actually just as efficient, and it was easy to put out. So when I say the liquid, you think we've got big worm windrows, and we're misting those worm windrows with an irrigator a number of times, and we capture that liquid. So you've captured all the mucus off the worm, you've captured all the microbes in the castings and all of the nutrients, and just a whole range of compounds that help plants grow. So they were capturing that and putting it out. They had lots of scientists involved. The whole family was involved. They were very passionate about it. You know, the girls were helping their dad write articles to put in the paper, and you would see them in the paper all the time. It was really new for Albury Wodonga. Like, we've got loads of clippings from the paper of Nutrisoil starting. And then Graham went around setting up windrows on people's farms. But farmers found they couldn't get the food stock and they couldn't keep the water up to them, so they were dying. So then Lynn and Graham started going to field days and selling the actual product. So that's how it started, yeah.
And would that be nearly 20 years ago, would it?
30.
Really?
So I found the first registration, 30 years ago, Nutrisoil was named as a business. So it started very small. Like, I remember I married Darren 22 years ago and they were out on the farm then. I saw Nutrisoil containers around and 200-litre drums, and they would have maybe a field day once a year. But they were farmers. That wasn't their primary business. But I think around 2007, they decided, I think from their passion for it, and the accountant saying, hey, this is probably a very good business. And Graham is a dreamer, an ideas man, an inspirational man. When in his time, you would just hang off every word he said in his time. He's older now and doesn't work in the business. He's retired, but he's left this amazing legacy.
I remember first being introduced to you guys in around 2007, 2008.
Yeah.
And it really sparked my interest for soil health. And especially when I spoke to Graham too.
Yeah.
There was one day out in the paddock, I remember, he looked at me and goes, the penny's dropped. Yeah. And I felt like I got just a little bit of it, but I just wanted to keep learning more. Yeah. And I guess from your point of view too, you know stacks, but is there so much more we need to learn about what happens in the soil?
Yes. Oh my gosh. We know 5% of the microbes in the soil.
Really?
We're just getting into the science of DNA. I think AI is going to help us a lot, but technology, identifying things. But at the end of the day, that interests us. But if you step back and you stop trying to kill things and you try to support nature to do what it's meant to do, then you have healthy soil. And I'm not a fanatical person that says no chemical, no fertiliser. Like, there's a balance, because industrial agriculture has got us to a point where our soils are depleted. So we need to make sure that we support plants with nutrients at the same time as putting Nutrisoil on. It's context specific. So some systems, like a grazing system, if they've got really good grazing management, Nutrisoil is all you need. Where, especially cropping, monoculture cropping, you really need to still be doing soil tests, you need to still be doing sap tests, monitoring it, supporting the plant, but adding biology with it.
Yes, yes.
And using less synthetic fertilisers, because that plant needs to work hard. If you give that plant all the synthetic fertilisers it needs, the microbes have no role. The root systems stay shallow, so it's not pushing through the soil. So you get lots of compaction, which means the microbes can't live there because they've got no air, they can't breathe. You can't fix nitrogen from the atmosphere because the microbes aren't living there. And you've lost so many functions of protection and resilience because you don't have that full suite of microbes there.
So we're talking protection and resilience, so protection from the bad bugs coming in and resilience such as a drought or frost.
Yes, yeah,
for that
absolutely.
Plant. Can I go back to the windrows?
Yeah.
What do they look like and how are they set up?
So they look like composting windrows. You would think that we had a compost turner, but we don't. The worms turn it all. They do all the work. We just need to keep them happy and healthy. So they're probably between 50 and 80 metres long. We've got about 30 of them at the moment. They could be anywhere from 1 to 2 metres high to 2 to 4 metres wide. We're doing some harvesting at the moment. You don't want them too big because it collapses all the plumbing underneath. They're all plumbed underneath and irrigated on top. So we feed the worms lots of diversity. The more diversity you feed the worms, the more diversity of nutrients and microbes into the system. So it's not actually the worms that break down the carrot or the fish or the straw, it's the microbes. So then the worms consume the broken down food that has all of the microbes in it. So that's how they're getting all of those microbes into their system. So food diversity is really important for the Nutrisoil worm windrows because we get more diversity of microbes. And the more diversity of microbes, the more resilience you've got in your soil because they all do different functions.
Thank you. And what are you feeding them?
It's pretty standard and it depends on what's around as well. But we're really lucky because we're close to lots of factories and we're close to cattle yards and abattoirs and things like that. But our main staple is straw from a biologically farmed farm. So we get straw from our farmers. Manures, so mainly cattle manure. We also get horse manure and we have to rest that because we're registered as a allowable input with Australian Organics.
So when you say rest it, in case the cow or the horse has been drenched for worms,
Yeah.
so you've got to let that chemical dissipate.
Yeah,
Yeah?
absolutely. I mean, worms clean up chemicals. That's one of their jobs. They're like bioremedial type of animals. But if you have too much, they're overloaded. Like glyphosate in the soil, that's why a lot of our worms are just not there anymore. One of the big failures of a worm farm, if someone's starting out, is they've gotten manure that hasn't been rested.
Yeah.
And the chemicals in there have killed the worms.
Yeah.
And the way they do that is we say, put your manure in a bucket that you use and put worms in there and just see if they live.
Yeah. Okay. So we've got straw, manure, but there'll be
Fish.
Fish?
Yeah, so from fishing competitions, they
Carp
deliver
and so
them.
forth?
Carp, we love carp. Like all the minerals that we want. So soft rock phosphate, crushed minerals, crusher dust, lime. You can't use too much lime because you kill them. Okara, they love okara. It's like porridge from the soy factory just over there. And that's got lots of nitrogen in it. We get food from food share, like eggs or bread, anything we put through except citrusy type of things.
Yeah.
And it has to be in bulk because we operate in bulk. Like we can't just go into a shop and get their scraps type of thing. We have had factories approach us and saying, we take their vegetables that they have left over, but it needs to be fairly clean waste that we can recycle. You don't want Lynn & Graham's place looking like a tip.
no.
And you don't want, our workers to be hurting each other with needles and glass. And so we've got to be careful. Yeah.
So what actually ends up in Nutrisoil, for example, the liquid, is it phosphorus, nitrogen, calcium, mixture of everything?
A mixture of everything, but it's in really low amounts. It still has an effect because it's complex. Like it's complex with all these carbon sources, amino acids and humic and fulvic acids, which means that it just keeps those nutrients in the form that the plant needs. So when we're putting out a synthetic fertiliser, the plant has to work harder. It has to convert those nutrients into a form that that plant can then use. Where we're giving the plant, when you put out Nutrisoil, these nutrients in low amount but complex, but also in microbial bodies and all of these other compounds like growth promotants that help that plant to grow. So it's a food source for your microbes in the soil, but it's a food source for your plant to photosynthesize more, grow bigger root systems.
So would you say if we feed the plant with Nutrisoil, the plant will feed the soil and in return grow a healthier plant?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It is a whole system. So if you're using lots of heavy machinery and a lot of chemical and all of those synthetics that are in high amounts, you're working against yourself. But if you're feeding the plant, you're feeding it microbes, nutrients. It actually takes those microbes in through the leaf of the plant. This is the whole rhizophagy process. And it uses those microbes, strips them of all their nutrients and then sends them out into the root systems again. And that's mainly bacteria. And then they come back again and they go in again. And it's this whole just moving through the plant. But if a plant has nutrients that's been in the body of a microbe, it just takes that plant to another level of resilience and health because there's so many other things than just a nutrient in that microbe.
You explain it so well.
Oh, thank you. It's fun. I love talking about it.
I think one day I'd love to come back and do another episode with you on more of the sciencey, the heavy stuff. But at the moment, keep it gentle. It's going well.
Okay.
What role do fungi and microbes play together in the soil?
So you've got three types of microbes: fungi, bacteria, and archaea. So fungi are your decomposers. They decompose like straw and the more larger things. They can transport microbes within them throughout the soil. They can grow like so far and they create this big network in the soil and they let out glues and they create soil aggregation in the soil because those glues are holding it all together and sticking it all together. You see under the microscope these little bits of just like little spider webs, but it's glue from the fungi. They can deliver phosphorus and nutrients to the plant. They can also find water and hold water and store water for hard times and then give it to the plant. So that's another reason your plant can hold on longer, because of this amazing fungi system. And fungi communicate. If there's a disease at one end of the crop, it sends communications to all of the plants in that paddock, and then they send out their defence mechanisms. So fungi are the most intelligent of all the microbes. Yeah. Then you've got the bacteria. They're just single cell. They don't have a brain. They just do their thing. There's lots of them, but they do lots of different functions. So they can fix nitrogen. They can solubilize nutrients. They can clean up chemicals in the soil. They are really essential as well. And then you've got archaea, and they're more your ancient type of microbes. But in an agricultural system, you don't have a lot of those. You're more looking at that fungal bacterial type of grouping together, and you want both.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
The life that's in the soil, or that can
the
be
functions
in the soil.
They do. Like there's some microbes, they like gang up on other microbes and like they tease them and they just create gangs and so much goes. It's really, they're like a community of people. And if you had a community of people with lots of baddies, then we have a bad life, like things go wrong. Same as in the soil.
Yeah.
You just got to keep a balance, because we have to have good and bad. Like if we didn't have bad in life, like bad anything, we wouldn't know what good is.
That's right.
That's how the whole world's made up. Like we're just like a plant. The soil is just like our stomach. Everything is just made the same, but so extremely complex and different and just constantly changing, constantly.
I reckon you could write a movie script with what happens underneath the soil.
Oh, there's this really good book. It's called There's a Poo in My Zoo, and I give it to kids all the time. And it's just about all the different microbes in their gut, and that helps them understand the microbes in the soil and all the different functions that they do. So if the kids don't eat a diversity of food, if they don't rest, if they don't hydrate themselves, they're going to have less diversity of microbes in their gut. And that's what they're finding in kids with like autism and that type of thing. So yeah, the human health side to the depletion of microbes in our soil is really concerning.
Yeah. I want to talk about the education side of it in a sec, but what are the main ways farmers can use Nutrisoil? From my knowledge and what I've learnt off you, I think of three basic ones. It's foliar spray.
Yep.
It's inoculating the seed,
Yep.
such as a crop or oats or wheat inoculating it before it goes into the soil. And also I've learnt one day out there with Graham, there was a farmer near Mangapla, he was dropping the liquid just below the seed. So when that seed wanted to shoot a leg or germinate, it was germinating quicker and trying to get down a little bit deeper.
Yeah.
But I think there's also more with castings and so forth now. But can you give us an example for when we're going to use foliar spray on pastures, for example? How would a farmer apply it?
For pasture, it is 5 litres per hectare, and it is a 20-to-1 ratio with water. Generally, water's just the carrier. Like you just want to make sure that 5 litres gets across the hectare, and you would do it in spring and autumn, so in the growing season. If it was dairy, you would do it more regularly. It's a high use type of system, like they graze more quickly and rotate more quickly than a grazing system. But if a grazing system came to me and said, I don't worry about grazing management. My sheep are set stocked in the same paddock all the time. I'd say do not bother using Nutrisoil. You're wasting your money. You have to work together. Yeah. So you've got to let that plant have recovery, because Nutrisoil, when you apply it at 5 litres per hectare, will help that plant photosynthesize more. And it just needs that time to recover, because when it recovers, it grows bigger root systems. Bigger root systems break through the compaction in your soil, feeds more microbes, so you've got more functions in your soil, and then you've got these healthier pastures that hold on longer, and the animals really are intelligent. They know a healthy plant from a plant that's not healthy.
I was going to ask about that. You do see preferential grazing, do you?
Yeah.
And they'll go to a paddock that's had, say, a Nutrisoil put on it?
Yeah, they'll eat weeds that they wouldn't have eaten before because they're sweeter. So there's microbes in the soil that help all of the functions lead to tastier food. basically. If you feed a plant in a soil that has a low diversity of microbes and you feed it really high nutrients, so NPK is what we talk about, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, we haven't fed them any trace minerals, and they're just drinking that up, they've got, you know, white root systems, there's no microbial life about it, it's a sour plant to an animal.
Yeah.
So you think of eating something from a vegetable garden and then something from a mass-grown industrial farm. The tomato in the vegetable garden is delicious. The strawberry, mouth-melting, doesn't happen in the supermarkets. You've got to find people that grow food well, source them out.
In an earlier episode, I interviewed Louis Diaga from Belgium, and he's all about soil health. And we discussed about at the supermarket, we should be buying it off a nutrient value rather than a quantity.
Yeah.
And that would stem from a healthier soil, a healthier vegetable or whatever it might be. I think that's a good idea.
Yeah, it's coming. There's a spectrometer being made. So a person will be able to go into the supermarket and put their spectrometer on that vegetable and on that vegetable and decide which one they want to buy on the nutrient value.
Fantastic.
Yeah, it's a little way away, but it's definitely in the making.
So going back to that farmer spraying out his pastures, he might have a boom spray or just a big spray on the back of his tank, and it's not necessarily the amount of water that's crucial, that's just the carrier.
Yeah.
And you said about...
If you're a really fast driver, you don't need as much water.
Yes, right. Now, the seed inoculation, I find this fascinating, and you've got some good friends, and I can call them friends too, over in the West, where I've learnt that they were putting it inside their auger just before it was being sown, and that was just putting like a membrane around the coating of that seed, and they've had great results.
Amazing. Yeah, that's the first thing you would do is coat your seed, if it was step one. Because if you think of a seed, it actually has a microbiome in its seed, and when it germinates, it wants to go out into a healthy system. And what are we doing? We're putting a fungicide on it. So any fungi is just killed. So they've got these highly bacterial environments they're trying to grow in. And we're putting synthetic fertilizer with them. And again, I'm not saying no synthetic fertilizer. I'm not saying no chemical. I'm just saying, how can you reduce it? How can you add it with biology? Chemicals, you know, can you add Nutrisoil with a chemical to buffer it so that it's not as harmful on the microbes? But going back to that seed inoculation, you're coating that seed with beneficial microbes, you're coating it with humic and fulvic substances, and all of these compounds that are just going to give that seed the best start to life. So it will put more energy into its root system. It won't jump out of the ground as quickly because it's going to be working really hard with that microbial connection. And that's what you want. You need to have these plants that are grounded in the soil and creating healthy soil.
And these people we're talking about over in the West, Ian and Di Haggerty, aren't they clever people?
Oh, they're legends. They are legends of regenerative agriculture. So they started using Nutrisoil, I think, around 2007. And I didn't start here till 2013, but I was certainly around. I was in the family. And they just got it. Like, they were using some synthetics at the start when they bought their farm, but it just wasn't adding up for them. And they're in the wheat belt of WA, like rainfall is very low, their soils are not very fertile. So putting a lot of fertiliser on wasn't going to work anyway. But over the time, they've gotten to a point where they don't have to use any synthetic fertiliser. But theirs is a whole system. So that's why I talk about context. So over summer, they don't spray out their pastures, or their fallow, which is the in-between your crop and another crop starting. They let all their weeds grow. And then those weeds over years turn into perennial grasses in the line where they're sowing. So you talk about that furrow and you're dripping that biology in that furrow. You go out there in summer and it's lines you would think they sowed of perennial grasses. Really? And that is just fixing so much nitrogen. It's adding so much fungi and biology to the soil, just keeping that soil healthy and cool over summer. And if you pour water next to that perennial grass, it sucks it up. If you pour water where there's no perennial grass, it just sort of pulls on top and repels it.
So in between crops, could even weeds like cakeweed be a tool? to add
Yeah, and
life?
again, so context specific, because someone can say I've got capeweed and you can, be blasé and say it'll transition out. And sometimes it doesn't. So you do have to help it a little bit if it's got a really big deficiency. So, that's why soil tests are important in different soils. So they had capeweed, the next year they had another weed, the next weed they had another weed, and it doesn't happen that, systematically, but generally there's a transition. So there's these succession weeds, so they'll go through a higher succession of a more intelligent plant. But every weed is there for a reason, but we don't want a paddock full of capeweed, and if it doesn't transition out, you're going to have to do something, and that could be in a natural system when that capeweed dies before it germinates again, so it's going to come back again. If you haven't been able to work it out, plant something else, so then it doesn't have that opportunity to germinate. It's often bare soil. Yeah.
And on that note, a big shout out to Ian and Di Haggerty, Western Australians of the Year last year.
Amazing, because there's so much work. And from that, they were nearly Australians of the Year. They were so close. But because of that, the Governor-General is right behind them, and they are creating these groups of soil scientists, biologists, health professionals meeting with Di and trying to study their system and work out how others can farm, or even the benefits of that farming system and the food quality and the low chemical imprint and how good it is for the environment. They are leading the way. They're absolute legends.
And it looks like they're on stages right around Australia right now, aren't they?
And their son too. They've got
Matthew?
Matthew, yeah. I mean, you remember Matthew when he was a tiny kid. Just wouldn't eat his broccoli. But now he's up there, he's suave and he's talking the talk, and people are following him.
Fantastic.
Yeah. Yep.
So what would be the first things farmers would notice after using it?
Sometimes nothing. And you've really got to prepare people for that.
Yeah.
It is a building process. But then there's been some unique times where you've seen definitely a green line. And it's often when people have been using a lot of synthetic fertilisers and the soil's starting to sort of balance itself out. Sometimes you might have a plant that's really stressed, it's gone purple, and you spray out Nutrisoil and it goes green again. But majority is you'll just see a nice pasture that's got, nice diversity. Over time, that diversity changes. There has been a time, and look, I've been guilty of it. We've all been very guilty of it in the very beginnings, of saying biology is all you need. But really, in an industrial agriculture system, which is what we're in, we need to absolutely monitor and help. So people will say, should I, they'll send a soil test and it's really acidic, and they'll say, where should I spend my money first? And I say lime. If it's really acidic, spend money on lime, and then when you've got that acidity a little bit sorted out, start putting in biology. Great to do it together, but that's going to hold back your microbes.
And you said before it's about building the soil, so that's just not a matter of spraying Nutrisoil on once and walking away, is it?
No, it's a regular building system, and Diane and Haggerty are nearly leading the way here. They want to get to a point where they don't have to use anything. They've got synthetics out now.
It's regenerating.
Yeah. They're still using Nutrisoil, compost extract, fish, molasses, all those natural products. But their dream is to have this system spot on, self-regenerating, like in nature. We weren't out there, how many, let's say 200 years ago, because we went farming like this 200 years ago. We weren't out there putting out worm liquid and compost tea and fulvic acid, all synthetic fertilisers. So they really believe they can get to that point and go them. And a really good grazing management system, sometimes if you're spot on with your holistic grazing, you probably don't even need Nutrisoil. But not many people have their grazing right. So it really does help them.
On that note, say if there could be a shortage of fertiliser or urea coming into Australia from the Middle East soon, maybe, is Nutrisoil a good option?
Yes,
to start.
So absolutely. And we'll help you through that. We've got a whole education facility where if you're a broadacre farmer and you come to us, we will fund a course called Reboot My Soil, which helps you to read a soil test with David Hardwick, who's an agroecologist.
Legend.
Agroecologist, yeah, it's the coolest guy.
Isn't he?
Love David. And then we have a hub care team of advisors who then help them with an action plan. Because the last thing we want someone to do is come and buy 20,000 litres of Nutrisoil, spend all of their urea budget on Nutrisoil and expect it to work the same. You do have to use a little bit of liquid nitrogen with it. Maybe you dissolve urea and add it with Nutrisoil so you're using less, because yes, it is going to get expensive, it is getting expensive, and there's potential of a non-supply. 2008, superphosphate went through the roof, so did urea, and we grew exponentially, and we kept those customers.
Yeah, great.
We have these booms, things go on, and there's a boom for some reason. It's a really good rainfall year, or it's a fertilizer shortage. We keep our customers because we look after them. We make sure that we don't tell them we are the silver bullet. It is context specific to your farming system, and you need to look at the whole system.
That's what I love about you guys. Your education to all these landholders is extraordinary, I think. And it's not all just about selling your product. You want it to work.
Oh, absolutely. And like, how embarrassing if you were out there selling something and you knew it wasn't going to work because you didn't put the time in to help them. Like, no one wants to do that.
Can you actually see healthy soil by just looking at it, the soil itself?
Yeah. When you look at a soil, if it is got little aggregations, like little round pieces of soil all stuck together with root systems.
So a little bit sticky?
Yes, yeah. So that's how they're made, is with sticky glues from the bacteria and the fungi.
And what's that called?
Glomalin is the sticky bit. There might be something else. I think you're thinking.
Rhizosphere or something.
The rhizosphere is the root system where all the microbes and soil stick to, yeah. So first the structure. If it's got lots of little clods, it looks like cottage cheese, there's root systems all through it, you know that there's microbes in there. Like, just guaranteed. You don't have to send away a microbe test. You're winning. If you pull up a root system, and this is what you're talking about now, is that rhizosphere, there's heaps of soil sticking to it and it's not white. You know that there is microbes there solubilizing nutrients and making lots of sticky glues going in and out of that root system, so you know you've got good microbial life. I've been to a farm and they're a high synthetic fertilizer user, and we dug up the soil and it was thick with white roots. They were all white and they were all going sideways. Like, you needed sunglasses to look at them. I couldn't believe those soils were out there. But you've got to have the microbial connection working at the root system and throughout your soil to have healthy soil. So you can see that. And you can see the horizons start to change. So if your soil was all one colour, you're potentially finding that you're not breaking down organic matter, which turns into humus and carbon and that type of thing. So you want a colour change. Yeah.
Can you smell healthy soil?
Absolutely, yeah. So the microbes in there, you can smell just a lovely, I don't even know how to explain it, but I smell it all the time, a lovely healthy soil. There's no soil I don't go to that I don't get on my nose. But you also can smell a sour soil.
Yeah. Okay.
Or a non-smelling soil. That's concerning too, yeah.
So what are the main reasons farmers are using Nutrisoil? Is it for yield, plant health, soil structure, or all of the above?
Yeah, all of the above. We've just sent out a survey and it was so interesting. The answers are still coming in, but soil health was above yield. And we were shocked. Like, it is important for farmers to get good yield, but not yield above everything else. Like, if farmers weren't profitable, we would run into a situation where they left the land and we didn't have food producers and we didn't have anything to eat. That's pretty extreme, but the corporations would take over. So, and their key driver is money. You know, farmers love the land. Yeah. They just, I get tingles every time when I make that distinction, because there's a spreadsheet and then there's a farmer. And a farmer just wants to regenerate their land. There's no farmer out there that doesn't. So we need those kind hearted, genuine people on the farm keeping us healthy, but they need education to stay profitable because we are in different times. We've got really varying rainfall, we've got droughts, we've got floods, and everything is rising. The costs of inputs are rising. So they need education, but they also need consumers paying more for their food when they know how it's grown, because they're paying for health. Like, we've got to value it. I mean, I know there's an issue with processed food, it's how you process it, but number one, it's how you grow it.
Oh, Nakala, what you've just said, that's what this podcast is all about.
Yeah. Farmers.
Absolutely.
Legends.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And we need to give them more respect.
Yeah.
Now, something a little bit smaller, home gardeners, they can use it too.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of home gardeners have their own worm farm, and so they can produce it themselves. But vegetables, lots of the most delicious vegetables. Any plant, and worm liquid can be used on any plant, natives as well, because it's a neutral pH, it's not acidic, you can't over apply. The worm castings on smaller areas, they're really just the gold of compost, because the microbes in worm castings are in the right balance. We can get compost wrong, we can get compost right, but you never get a worm product wrong. You can make a worm product better by feeding the system more diversity and making the worms really abundant, so there's lots of worms in there, and you make sure it has all turned into castings. But what comes out of their gut is always going to be right. Yeah.
And I often say to people, I spray it on anything that grows.
Yeah, yes.
But the only problem I've got is I've tried a little bit of it on the hair of my head and nothing happened, Nakala.
Oh, but that's so interesting though. Maybe not hair, but I actually think like spraying it on your skin gives you that biological film, you know, like I think it's a good beauty product. Yeah.
Really? All right. A new label coming out soon?
Yeah, well, we've talked about it.
And just talking about the vegetables and so forth, or plants in general, it becomes a bit more frost resilient, doesn't it?
Yeah. That's got to do with the thickness of the cell walls. Like when you're putting a lot of nitrogen on in particular, what happens is the plant grows more quickly than it's healthy for it. Like it doesn't grow well. It's like us being in the gym and taking steroids. Like your body can't cope with how big you get. The same as a nitrogen fed plant. And I'm not saying a little bit of nitrogen, and I'll give you some context, you know, like if you were putting out dissolved 30 kilos of nitrogen, 20 kilos of nitrogen, you know, your plant in a healthy system can deal with that. If you're putting out 300 kilos of nitrogen, you really need to look at what you're doing.
Yeah.
Because you're not going to be profitable. But the plants, like, it's not strong, it's watery, like the actual cells in it holds a lot of water, and you think, oh, that's great, you want a lot of water, but you don't, not there. When the frost comes, it just freezes.
And plant disease too, like you're adding in the good bugs to fight off any bad bugs that might come in, is that right?
Yeah. So industrial agriculture can create environments where the good bugs die and the bad bugs can take over. So that's why we're getting disease. That's why we're putting out pesticides and fungicides. So what you want to do is make sure that that system is balanced out. And Nutrisoil is adding microbes, but those microbes, some live, some die. You're actually adding tools to the toolbox, because even when those microbes die, their DNA stays in that soil and their skills transfer to other microbes. So it's feeding microbes that are there, your native microbes, when you spray out Nutrisoil, but it's also adding microbes that are going into the plant, cycling around, and then they'll balance each other out. Yeah, but you've got to stop doing harm as well.
Yeah.
You know, buffer your chemicals, use less synthetic fertiliser, use less tillage.
Yeah.
Less overgrazing.
I always get fascinated when I come here. It's such large scale now. And just the other day I was driving past and there was a B double driving out. Where would that truck have been going to?
That would have gone to WA. We've had a couple going there because they're just about to start sowing in the wheat belt. Yeah, but now is our busy time.
So for someone wanting to know more or learn more about your product or purchase some, what are they to do?
Have a look at our website. Give us a call. We love to chat on the phone.
Nutrisoil.com.au
yes.
website?
Yep. And that's got our phone number on it. Go to a soil health event. We're often mentioned in all the soil health events. Our name's dropped all the time.
And you have lots of events yourself.
And we do events ourselves. We've got a podcast, the Biological Farming Roundtable podcast.
I was going to mention that. And where can they find that? That's on the main podcast platforms?
Yeah, any podcast platform. Just Google Biological Farming Roundtable, and we've got a huge following. So I interview farmers who are farming regeneratively, as well as anyone to do with soil health, basically. It's
a great podcast. I recommend our listeners having listened to that too. And they can also find that at your website as well as videos and so forth.
Yeah.
With lots of interesting guests. All right, Nakala, we're up to the off-the-wall questions.
Okay.
These are fun, a little bit quirky.
I thought it was already fun.
You mentioned Darren, your husband, before. He's responsible for the production side of it out on the farm, is that right?
And Rob, yeah, we've got a plumber out there too, Rob. They're the main guys. Graham helps as much as he can, but he's more retired.
So therefore, if the worms could talk, what would they say about your husband, Darren?
They'd ask him what's for dinner. They'd say what's in the mixer. What else would they say? He's the guy that gives me food.
Does he sing to them too?
Oh, he's always out there singing away, absolutely. And look, he's a quiet person, so nothing happens quickly. He's contemplative, so, there's a nice energy out there for them. He's not rushing them. Yeah.
You say he's a quiet person, but I've seen him up on stage stacks of times with a microphone and guitar.
Amazing. You see him in a group of people and he'll be quiet. You put him on stage and
look out.
Yeah, that's how I met him on stage.
There you go. What's the strangest thing worms have ever been fed before?
I went out to a farm in Corowa and I saw lots of clothes in there. They were putting all their woolen clothes in there that they weren't wearing. So, yeah, you can feed them anything.
They'll break down the wool?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. That is strange. If you had to explain soil biology to a 10-year-old or a 5-year-old, how would you do it?
I would relate it back to what they knew in their life. So in the soil, you've got lots of different microbes that do different functions. So you've got microbes that deliver food. So let's call them the Uber drivers and the, Uber Eats, they deliver food to you. So they go, they get the food and they take it to your house. You've got those microbes in there. And then you've got microbes that are like the radio station. They help everyone communicate, and we've all got to know what's going on in the world. And then we've got microbes that are the garbage collectors. So they come and pick up your rubbish each week. Imagine if you didn't get your rubbish picked up each week, how dirty and grotty everything would be and how it would all just create stink. And then we've got, you've got communicators, your medics. So there's an ambulance driver down there. If you didn't have an ambulance driver coming to you when you were sick or you couldn't go to the GP and get medicine, we would be in big trouble. So all of these diversity of jobs are down there. And if we take out any of those things, and if we took out any of those things in your life, imagine how difficult life would be. So we need to make sure that everyone down there is keeping their jobs.
I love that. Love it. What would you change about how kids learn about soil at school?
I think they're getting good at veggie gardens. So lots of schools have got veggie gardens and they do have their ag department, but it's a little bit conventional. We have lots of schools come here, so it is changing. We have lots of universities come here and schools and homeschoolers come here and we give them tours. But I think, relating it like I did that simply to their life, to the life down there. Like our environment is just like an environment down there. So we've got to have all of the roles happening. Our stomach is like the root system of a soil. If we don't have diversity of food into our stomach, and we don't have diversity of plants and animals and all sorts of things going into the soil, then again, we're going to not feel well. We're going to get sick. So relating our environment, the environment down there, and how everything is connected. Every decision you make to the soil connects something in our environment, whether it be our food, whether it be how much water we can hold and how water flows through the system, whether it be the greenhouse gases that we can capture or reduce from farming, we just want a healthier environment for the kids, and they're learning that. And I think the more that is taught in schools, that the soil and the community in the soil is just, it's the ground. It is the ground of us. We need to be grounded in healthy soil. Yeah.
Thank you. And do worms ever surprise you?
Oh, absolutely. We do that monitoring all the time. Like, we've learnt some things, if it's too wet, they don't breed. If it's too much lime, will kill them. But there's times, with that low rainfall, we're like, how can we get them to proliferate more, and we're still searching for that answer. So there's times we can collect and times we can't. So we are constantly researching them. We do research grants all the time, with the government, so they're supporting it.
What would the world look like if every farm had a healthy biology in their soil?
It would just be an oasis. And it's not just looking at the farm, it's the food that would go to the people. So the food that would go to the people would be healthy, and people would feel well, and there would be less conflict in the world. There would be less competition in the world because someone's not trying to take over someone else's country. If we just looked after the soil microbiome, we would have a much more peaceful world.
Nakala, I just love coming out here. You and your team just give off such positivity, and you're very generous with information you give out, and you've been very generous with me today and your time.
Oh, thank you. It's been an absolute joy.
You're very clever. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for being so interested in sharing our story.
Well, that's it for today's episode. A big thanks to the clever Nakala Maddock for joining us and sharing the story behind Nutrisoil and vermiculture. It's a great reminder that healthy soils really do start with the small things. Nutrisoil's website is in the show notes and definitely worth a look. Thanks for listening to Salt of the Earth Farm Stories. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure you follow or share it with someone who might get something out of it. I'm Darren Grigg. Until next time, keep your hands dirty and your spirits high.